Welcome to Organized Chaos, the podcast dedicated to helping seven-figure companies grow to nine-figure ones by turning HR into rocket fuel for their growth. I'm your host, Nahat Kairala, and I've been helping companies do just that for more than a decade. In each episode, I'll dive into HR topics that have a significant impact on your company's growth and leave you with actionable advice that will help your business reach its full potential. Let's dive right in and start organizing all that HR chaos. Hello and welcome back to the show. This is episode 12, and I'm staying on the hiring theme from last episode. But this time, I'll focus on how you can identify candidates who are potentially a bad fit for your startup. We generally recognize great companies from their products and services, the things we use every day and pay for with a smile on our faces. These companies are great because of their people, the folks who actually conceptualize, design, and build these products and services you admire. What separates great companies from the mediocre and forgettable ones is the people. When you're a scrappy startup that's just starting out, your first 50 employees are super critical. Every person you hire has to be a superstar because your company's existence depends on it. They are the people who will help you design amazing products, weather economic storms, deal with setbacks, and help your business grow to sustainability. Not every person is a good fit for working at an early stage startup. It's not that they're not good at what they do, they just aren't the right fit for the startup environment. Startups that are trying to break ground in the market need people that are built differently than the average person. They need people who have the discipline to operate in a highly unstructured environment where they need to create the structure. Startups need people who have grit, people who can withstand the risk, volatility, and setbacks that most startups experience in the early days. These people are passionate about what they do and dedicated to the company's mission. They believe in what your startup is trying to do. They believe in you as a founder, and they believe in the team you've surrounded yourself with. Finally, the ideal startup employee is someone who works for the future more than the present. In other words, they are trying to do something special, achieve something that gives them personal and professional fulfillment. So they are not focused on short-term economic gains above all else. They are driven by an internal need to achieve greatness, and they are relentless in that pursuit. Well, that's all fine and well, but how do you find these people? Most importantly, how do you sniff out the posers, those candidates who are great at interviewing, but lack what it truly takes to thrive in your startup's environment? In my 10 plus years of hiring for startups, there are 5 red flags that come up during interviews that I want to share with you today. Let's start with red flag number 1, candidates who prioritize short-term pay. Unless you're the founder of some hotshot startup with millions in venture capital, your best bet in hiring top talent is to offer relatively competitive base pay, meaning within 15% of the market, and complementing that with equity and other performance-based compensation. More often than not, you'll find yourself dealing with candidates who are fixated on the cash compensation that they can get today, regardless of the potential compensation they could be making in the near future. You can pick up on this when you discuss compensation early in the process. If you're wondering why I'm saying you should do this early in the process, then I recommend you check out the previous episode where I dive into this more deeply. Candidates who are lasered in on the base pay and try to negotiate it while almost entirely ignoring the other parts of your compensation package are simply telling you that they just care about today, the now, not the tomorrow. Now, as a reminder, I'm assuming that you are offering competitive base pay, not trying to take advantage of candidates and get them to work for less than they're worth. So again, assuming you have a relatively competitive compensation package, you should raise the first red flag if a candidate is only interested in the base pay component. The reason I say this is because these types of candidates are likely to jump ship very quickly if they get a better offer. They are primarily interested in their short-term financial gain and padding their resume, but they're not going to be very passionate about the job or what the company is trying to achieve. These types of individuals are also very risk averse. They panic and jump ship at the first sign of trouble. Another observation I've made is that these types of people also struggle to comprehend how a startup's financial performance ties into their own compensation potential. I've seen countless examples of employees who raised this flag in the interview process only to get hired. They would then go on to throw a hissy fit if they didn't get a raise in a year when the company lost money or a major client. This past summer, I was visiting my family in Lebanon and met up with one of my closest friends from high school, who is an entrepreneur and currently runs a 7-figure SaaS business for the construction industry. We were talking about the state of talent and generational differences, and during the conversation, he told me a story that completely blew my mind. So the company has a design services arm with only 2 employees that supports existing SaaS customers, as well as other clients in the market who are not SaaS subscribers. The company hasn't really invested in expanding the service, although it generates a healthy profit. So it's a good revenue stream that needs a bit of attention and marketing to grow. My friend doesn't want to personally manage that part of the business and prefers to focus exclusively on the SaaS platform. So he comes up with what I believe to be a genius idea to boost revenue from the design services. He wanted to spin off the services division, which employs 2 people, into a separate company. To incentivize these 2 employees, he offered them a 49% share while he retained 51%. In addition, he offered to keep their basic salaries the same, but they would lose their performance bonuses because they would share the profits based on their ownership percentages. As a kicker, existing clients and revenues were also part of this deal, and the 2 employees would get a cut. Overall, the immediate cash compensation for these employees would go down because they no longer received bonuses, but the potential income was enormous. Guess what those 2 employees said when he pitched the idea to them? They both said, "We'll think about it." They ended up turning it down. These are employees who have been at the company for years. I think that says it all. Red flag number 2, candidates who have an employee mentality. Employee mentality is a mindset that primarily focuses on completing tasks within one's scope of work. These are the employees who focus on what's in their job description and show little to no interest in anything outside of it. They rely on external motivations like promotions, raises, and praise from their managers to perform, rather than intrinsic or self-driven goals. There's nothing wrong with an employee mentality. In fact, it's great when you have an army of these employees at a large corporation. You know, the people who will do what's asked of them, stay in their lane, and go about their business. Well, I have news for you. Hiring people with an employee mentality into an early stage startup is like injecting someone with cyanide. They'll kill your company from the inside. Again, that's not because they're not good employees. It's because they are the wrong employees for an early stage startup. You want people who want to venture outside their comfort zone. People who will take initiative and jump at a problem even if it's not in their job description, or even if they don't know how to solve it yet. You want proactive employees who don't need a kick in the ass to get things done. Early stage startups need employees who have an entrepreneurial mindset. They make decisions with the company's benefit in mind, not their job role or department in isolation of the big picture. They are good stewards of the capital available to them and treat the company as if it were their own. So how do you spot candidates with an employee mentality? The best way to spot this is by probing into their work experience and trying to find instances where they ventured outside the confines of their job role, or when they volunteered for work that didn't fall within their area of expertise, but did so because the company needed it. For example, you can ask something like, "Tell me about a time when you stepped outside your comfort zone. What was the situation and what did you do?" Or you could ask something like, "Tell me about a time when you were faced with a challenging decision and walk me through your decision-making process." You can also ask questions that probe into situations of conflict with other employees. For example, walk me through your approach for solving interpersonal conflicts with colleagues and give me an actual example to explain. A lot of interpersonal conflict generally comes from disagreements around responsibility and accountability over work. Those situations where the phrase, "it's not in my job description," gets tossed around. Red flag number 3, candidates who don't bother to learn about your company. This one's very straightforward. If a candidate doesn't bother to research your company before an interview, then not only are they lazy, but they're just not interested in the work or the company. These folks are simply looking for a paycheck, point blank. And someone skimming your homepage doesn't count. I like to start off some interviews by asking candidates what they know about our company and what piqued their interest in wanting to work for us. You'd be amazed at how many times I've gotten ridiculous answers. I've had candidates tell me things that were nowhere close to what our company does. I'm talking about describing different industries, to saying we make different products, to not knowing which job they were interviewing for. When I come across candidates like this, I generally end the interview early and only ask a few questions out of respect. Then we blacklist them so we know that those candidates should never be contacted again. You can imagine how hiring someone like that would go. These are the types of employees who you need to watch like a hawk to make sure they're actually working. I don't know about you, but no one has time for that, nor is that a culture that any respectable company wants to instill. When you hire someone, you are trusting them to deliver value based on their skills and expertise. This means that you are trusting them to do the work and be a responsible employee, someone who earns their paycheck, not someone you need to micromanage into working. Stay away from these types of candidates, no matter how great their resumes look. Red flag number 4, candidates who ask questions about perks, not the job. This one might come off as a surprise to a lot of you, but I've seen it so many times that I had to include it on this list. Have you ever had a candidate make comments about how their current employer's time off policy is better than yours? Have you ever had a candidate say that they can't work from home if you don't give them an equipment stipend? I have. For reasons that I cannot explain. Most of these candidates only ask about perks. They rarely ask anything about the job role or the company, especially in the initial interview. I don't know about you, but a candidate that doesn't have anything to ask about a job is not someone I'm willing to hire at a startup. There's nothing wrong with asking about compensation, benefits, and perks. They're all important inputs that go into a candidate's decision. The problem I have is with the attitude and mindset. The examples I gave exhibit 2 behaviors that are a cancer to startups: entitlement and pettiness. Telling the employer of a remote company that you cannot work unless they pay for your home office furniture is next level stupid when you're being provided with a work laptop and a competitive salary. Is a candidate's job acceptance decision really going to come down to 5 extra days of vacation time? If it is, then there are many other companies out there who can have them. Let me be clear. I don't believe in hustle culture and working employees to the ground. In fact, I think companies that operate like that have poor leadership, a mess of an operation, and will eventually lose their best employees. We need to set employees up for success if we want them to help our company succeed. You want candidates who have a genuine interest in the role. People who will ask thoughtful questions that show they have a good head on their shoulders and a genuine interest in the role in the company. But when you have candidates who cannot see the forest for the trees, then your best bet is to wish them luck and move on to the next one. Last but not least, red flag number 5, candidates who show an inability to adapt and solve problems. Startups deal with a barrage of decisions that they need to make without having all the information they need. Most of the problems are unstructured in nature and require employees to adapt their decision-making accordingly. Many employees who fail at startups struggle in this area. They can be amazing at their craft, but their inability to solve problems quickly and adapt to change can be their Achilles heel. I like to ask questions related to problem solving and adaptability and see what candidates give me. For example, questions like the following work well here. Give me an example of a problem you faced at work and what you did to resolve it. Or walk me through a major challenge that you have experienced at work. How did it impact your role and what did you do to overcome it? The big management consulting companies do an amazing job in testing for this using their case interviews. For those of you who are not familiar with this, A case interview is where an interviewer presents the candidate with a real business case that the company tackled and asks specific questions around it to understand how the candidate thinks through problems. They generally focus on the candidate's ability to break down the problem into smaller components and ask questions that help them uncover more information. The interviewer also evaluates the candidate's assumptions when solving the problem because the information provided is intentionally incomplete. The objective of the case interview is to understand how the candidate thinks through problems and not about giving the right answers. I've personally used variations of the case interview in many job roles and industries. The goal is for you to evaluate how a candidate will handle real business problems that they're likely to face on the job. For example, a software engineer can go through a coding challenge and walk you through their logic for writing the code, while an HR manager can talk you through a case around an employee relations issue with legal risk and how they would approach that problem. Candidates who struggle in realistic job previews like these will almost always struggle on the job. Don't just rely on generic interview questions to evaluate a candidate's fitness for the job. Deep dive into their ability to solve problems and adapt to changes that come their way because that's how life at a startup is like. And that's all I have for this episode. In the next episode, I'll discuss the changes you should make to your hiring as you scale from 50 to 100 to 500 plus employees. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review wherever you get your podcasts. This will help me spread the word about Organized Chaos and keep the show going. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to suggest for the show, please send me an email to hello@organizedchaos.fyi. For more content and resources, make sure to check out the website at organizedchaos.fyi. See you on the next one.